Oh, back tonight with some international news. Japan's trade minister is denying media reports she plans to resign over allegations that she violated election laws. Questions over Yuko Obuchi's use of campaign funds are the latest in a series of uproars over activities by some members of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's cabinet. Obuchi says her top priority is to investigate the allegations over reporting and use of campaign funds. She said she has no immediate plans to meet with Abe or to resign. The 40-year-old Obuchi is a former newscaster and the daughter of a former Prime Minister. She is considered a possible future contender for Prime Minister. Obuchi is one of 5 women Abe appointed to cabinet-level posts in a reshuffle last month that highlighted his commitment to promoting women to leadership positions. 2 Germans were freed yesterday after being held for 6 months by a militant group in the southern Philippines. The Abu Sayyaf group said a ransom was paid. The released hostages were flown to Manila earlier today. The 2 Germans, a man and a woman, were freed just hours after the Abu Sayyaf group threatened to behead one of them. The Al-Qaeda-linked group told a radio station in Zamboanga City that it had received more than $5 million in ransom. It did not say who made the payment. Abu Sayyaf gunmen seized the 2 Germans from a yacht in waters between Malaysia's Sabah state and the western Philippine island of Palawan back in April. They were taken to a predominantly Muslim province in the south of the Philippines. The Philippine military says the newly freed hostages are now under the care of the German embassy. The German foreign minister thanked the Philippine government for its cooperation, without giving details on how the release came about.
The World Health Organization is accused of bungling efforts to halt the spread of Ebola in West Africa. So, President Barack Obama has appointed an Ebola czar to head up U.S. response to the virus. This as fear of Ebola continues to spark panic around the world. A Texas health worker who may have had contact with specimens from the first patient diagnosed with Ebola in the United States has been isolated on a cruise ship in the Caribbean. Fearing Ebola could spread to Belize, the Prime Minister of the Central American nation refused to allow the passenger to be flown from one of its airports back to the U.S.
If it had been at all possible to do this thing in a way that could absolutely have eliminated any possibility of any risk to Belizeans, I would have been willing.
That same ship is now headed back to Texas after authorities in Cozumel, Mexico refused to allow it to dock. One more reason why Texas Governor Rick Perry is pleading with President Obama to ban air travel from Ebola regions. Instead, Obama put former White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain in charge as the new Ebola czar. Klain has no medical or health expertise, but he replaces the director of the CDC, who's accused of bungling the Ebola situation in Dallas, where 2 nurses contracted the disease.
If this guy is skilled in handling resources and information, he's the guy.
Ebola panic worsened when officials disclosed that a nurse tested positive for the virus shortly after getting off a Frontier Airlines plane from Cleveland to Dallas-Fort Worth. Frontier has since grounded that plane and alerted hundreds of passengers to monitor their health. The World Health Organization, as an arm of the United Nations, is accused of failing to prevent Ebola from spreading. But this UN representative insists only a global effort can stamp out the epidemic.
But the only way to stop Ebola spreading is to support the efforts on the ground. We cannot be crushed by this disease, and we will not.
Sonya Artero, TVB News. Ukraine's president is sounding a note of optimism after European brokered talks with Russia on both a definitive peace settlement in Ukraine and a worrisome gas dispute. James Aiken with the latest.
After rocky face-to-face talks early Friday, which the Kremlin said were full of misunderstandings and disagreements, both sides later were at least sounding more hopeful about progress towards a stable peace deal.
The key element of that is ceasefire and we agreed about the practical steps to control and effective management, monitoring and verification of the ceasefire with the participation of the OSCE.
The West has imposed punishing sanctions on Russia in response to its annexation of Crimea in March and its support for pro-Russian armed separatists. Russia continues to deny the charges but says it has a right to defend the interests of the region's Russian-speaking majority. Russian President Vladimir Putin said both sides shared blame for violations of the ceasefire. But he praised Poroshenko's move to give more powers to eastern Ukraine and also supported international monitoring of the truce with drones. As for progress on a gas deal, Putin said the sticking point remains financing. He wants the European Union to pick up the tab with financial assistance to Ukraine, which European leaders say they are considering. Putin also promised that Russia would not create a gas crisis in Europe, but would react to any attempts to steal gas from pipes that run through Ukraine. Russia cut off gas supplies to Ukraine in the summer over unpaid bills, raising the risk that Ukraine would siphon off gas destined for Europe. If that happened, Europe worries that Russia would cut off all flows through Ukraine, leaving parts of Europe without gas during winter.
So on energy, because we believe this is a critical issue in the relationship between Russia and Ukraine, also with a very important impact on all Europe.
More meetings to reach a gas deal between Russia, Ukraine, and the European Commission are scheduled for next week in Brussels. James Aiken, TVB News.
All right, Tony, over to you for some Hong Kong Open action, I understand.
That's right. Golfing fans will be delighted to hear about the latest. At the Hong Kong Open, Marcus Fraser holds the lead going into tomorrow's final round of play. Fraser leads fellow Australian Scott Henn by 1 stroke.